Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Sports Community live stream. Very, very pleased today to have joining me Craig Armstead. Craig is the and it's important to say, ex-CEO of the Essendon District Football League. For those that have been following Sports Community over a number of years, you'll know that I'm the ex-CEO of the Mornington Peninsula Nepean Football League. And so two ex-CEOs having a chat today. Craig, welcome to you.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be on. Yeah, it's a topic I've got a real interest and a passion for, so I look forward to having a chat.
Yeah, well, the topic that we're really keen to discuss and explore is the concept of player payments. Now, we come at it from an AFL level, but player payments is becoming quite prolific in a number of sports around the country at community level, and I was really interested because the league that you were the CEO of for a number of years, the Essendon District Football League, last year went through a process with their clubs of reviewing the salary cap, and I think it was your league position that you wanted to reduce the salary cap for the player payments, and that was your position?
Yeah, listen, when it was first introduced, which came out of AFL Victoria, across all the metropolitan leagues, there was they were all at different levels. And so there was a plan over a 3-year time frame to get them to 2020. The objective was that all leagues would be at $200,000 at their top division by the year 2020. And so everyone had a plan of how they're going to progress to that. And so that had been in place for a number of years. And so, yeah, for us, and that was by 2020. So 2019, our salary cap was $220,000 in Premier Division. So we'd planned to bring it down to $200,000. And like I said, all metropolitan leagues have signed on to do that in conjunction with AFL Victoria to get to that point by 2020. So that was sort of a stake in the ground, if you will, that everyone was trying to aim to get towards. So whilst we'd planned to take it down, but it wasn't like just overnight we had this idea that we wanted to take it down. It was part of a longer-term strategy that the league supported and all the metropolitan leagues supported to get to that point.
So at the start of 2019, and you oversaw, or the EDFL kind of oversaw 3 different leagues, and so a premier with a promotion relegation to a second tier, and then a more community level league. So what were the salary caps in those other 2 leagues then at the time?
It was 220 for the top division. It was 175 for, we called it Premier Division 1, Division 2. So Division 1 was 175 and it was 145 for Division 2. So what I should kind of mention on it is that, which is kind of back to your intro, was it's a football club salary cap. So anyone who plays in your club, so if you're playing an under-19 player, if you've got female football, or if you've got netball, or anyone playing for your club. Now, it's traditionally been senior men's football that's been, kind of where the focus has been. And certainly in EDFL, because women's football and netball were just starting, there was very few, if any, were getting paid. But it was, it was a club salary cap.
Yeah, cool. Okay. And I guess when I look at it now, after spending 8 years or 9 years working with volunteers, I look at that salary cap of $220,000 odd dollars, 200,000, 185, 145, and they're a little bit blasé figures when we kind of talking at it from the admin point of view. But from the volunteer perspective, they're massive numbers to need to, if you're going to pay the salary cap, for instance. And so I was really interested in, as the discussions last year were, when it was, sorry, let me restart that sentence again. When the concept of reducing the salary caps was tabled to the clubs as a group, what was their initial feedback and thoughts?
It was mixed. And again, the clubs were aware of it, so it wasn't, like I said earlier, a 3-year plan, and that was documented and shared with clubs. So it wasn't left field, which is where's this coming from. But I guess as it was going on, there were different views at clubs, and that varied from Premier Division 1, Division 2 as to kind of what they thought. And it was interesting. Some supported the reduction. Probably the majority supported the reduction. Some didn't. And listen, the arguments against it were a few, but I guess probably the strongest one was, and particularly in Premier Footy, was that they felt that the reduction in salary cap had been reflected in a deterioration in the quality of the football, because they didn't have the money to buy as many ex-AFL players or higher quality players than they'd previously had in their team. So, you'd get club presidents who'd say, if my 2019 senior team played against the 2014 senior team, the 2014 would beat them by 8 or 10 goals. And they felt that was the case across the board, that the standard had deteriorated. And listen, I had agreed with that in some aspects, I didn't in others. And my view was always, because it was coming out of AFL Victoria, so simultaneously that reduction was happening across all the leagues, because if it was us, and I'd say, well, okay, in EFL world, well, look, we've just lost 25 of our best players have gone across the road to the Northern Footy League because they've got $50,000 more in their salary cap. Then, that could be that logically makes sense. But if we're all moving reduction on the salary cap across the board consistently, then I don't know how that actually happens. So now, what that leads you to is, I guess the biggest question around it is how much confidence you have in the ability of a governing body to police it and enforce it. And, therefore, the honest clubs who are playing by the rules and having open book and doing it transparent and abiding by the salary caps, are they being disadvantaged on field because there's other clubs who are not necessarily following the same and therefore have got better players and can put a better team on the park and are actually playing above the nominated salary cap but only declaring it to that level. So that's just an ongoing discussion. So
yeah, it's interesting, the moral and ethical, because I actually, the reality is that community sport, there's some methods and techniques you can use to fix up to identify the salary cap breaches or payments. But my question has always been, well, why should you have to? Because there's the rules there don't cheat, and I get that you got to enforce the rules, but it's a moral and ethical leadership that either the clubs are saying we are going to cheat, or you are going to cheat. Like it's as simple. We choose to cheat, or you're going to choose to cheat. But blaming that on the administrators for not being able to pick up the fact that someone's cheating. But I take the concept of the marquee player, and let's just broaden it bigger than AFL players. And I take the concept that clubs want to create a salary cap available to go and recruit the best players at the marquee level. I get that, but my experience is that was actually being used predominantly by clubs to poach the locals from other clubs. The players, 10 to 25 on the list were equally as in demand as the marquee players. And what we found in the MPNFL when the player point system was brought in and the point system was brought in originally to reduce player payments. That was initially what the point theory was, in a way that you could oversee and you could manage. What actually happened was it inflated the cost significantly of your bottom end players, because they were 1 and 2 and 3 point players, and you could fit them under the point system. So I see the argument about we use the player payments to attract marquee players, but the reality is when you look at how clubs spend it, they're spending them pretty much. Would this be your experience? Their whole playing list, in some way, shape, or form, or at the senior level, a lot of it was being paid, and I question that.
And I think that has been in the last probably 20 or 30 years, or even more recently, one of the notable changes. Like my father was a president of an EDFL club for many years, and so I can remember just going back to the 80s when he was president. When there was play payments going on, then there was no salary caps or anything like that, but it was more marquee players. In the era it was ex VFA or VFL players, and that those marquee players that you thought on top of what was predominantly a local community base of juniors. It was a top up of marquees who could potentially make a difference to success. Whereas now it's I obviously in the role, all the player contracts had to be lodged with the league, every player contract. So you see how many players are contracted. It's across the board in senior footy, particularly at Premier, that everyone out in the field is getting paid in one format or another. And I think I think it was 2018. We calculated across the entire league, we processed over 2,200 transfers or clearances in the old days. Now that's junior, senior, the whole lot. We had about 11,000 players, registered players. So you start thinking, listen, that's a serious number of people who are moving clubs from year to year. I was one of that. If you looked at, what was the average tenure of a player at a club, and has that deteriorated over time? Because I think one of the concerns I have around the whole salary cap and player payment is it is reducing the community aspect of your club, and therefore reducing the loyalty that this is not my local club. And I did. I mean, I played in the EDFL on my footy, and I grew up a kilometre from the club like most did, and you just went down there with all your schoolmates and you played footy, and and you stay around there. Whereas now, I think it's obviously that the amount of money that's available to players gives them incentive, to your point, not just your 5 or 6 marquees, but players 10 to 20 on the list can actually move between clubs, and and there's money to do that. And that's why, and even we used to look at the divisional thing, because if I'm player 15 to 20 at a Premier League club, all of a sudden the next level down, they could be, I think that they were targeting those sort of guys, and I could actually get more money by going, and being in the 1 to 10 players in the next division down, and I could get more money doing that than I could staying at my home club being player 15 to 20 in a higher division. As just one example of, to your point, as the spread of payment goes through a broader range of your playing list, you get different machinations that fall out of that, and I just think that the transfer of players is a numerical indicator that shows that that's what's actually happened.
I agree, and I'm strongly of the opinion that that's not what community sports clubs are about. And the benefit of being in now the over 50s bracket is that we've got a little bit of water under the bridge and experience, and we can use this whole benefit of hindsight. And a very good friend of mine who's been the sponsorship coordinator for 25 years at a local footy club, at least 25 years. When I first started talking to him about sponsorship, he would say that the most important person in the club is the sponsor, because the sponsorship coordinator, because the sponsorship coordinator really creates the bucket of money that can go out and buy the players. Have a bad sponsorship. And I didn't get that initially back as a younger guy. I thought that was ridiculous. But we see that flags won and lost on the back of that boom bust type methodology. Yeah. And so when we sit back and look about it, we go, well, the flags were great, but was it actually good for the club? Because where are those people? They are community clubs. They're meant to be, well, in the main, community clubs played by the community, watched by the community, sponsored by the community, for the community, playing against the local surrounding communities, almost in local derbies every week. Kids playing against their school friends, etc. And the player payment system has moved everything away from that to be, let's just get the best team that we can. And I think with the benefit of looking back at 10 years, 12 years since I was CEO of the Footy League, I don't think that's done the clubs any favours. And particularly in this COVID period, when people are going to come back, I think we're going to see the cost of that strategy.
Yeah, no, true. I agree with that. And I mean, I think my experience would be in junior footy. It's still got a really strong community feel about it.
Yeah,
They
no
tend,
doubt.
and that I think in some respects hasn't changed. And so it gives you a contrast of, in EDFL world, senior footy happens on a Saturday and juniors happen on a Sunday. When you go to the same club on both days that weekend, and it can have a different feel about it. Not every club. I think some club have still got to manage to engage the community, even if the players aren't necessarily, or what percentage of them have come local. It's still a place where the local community come on a Saturday afternoon and watch a game of footy and catch up with their mates and go in the rooms afterwards and have a beer and talk about the game. I think there is still a significant community element to it off field. And so you look at most of the administrators and the volunteers, they tend to be local. It's just the players who tend to be the ones who come in and out. And so, I think it loses that. And so, you get the kids up to, say, 18 or 17 or 18 who are still part of their local community club. And then it can start to get diverse. And, it does. I mean, I think the local community derbies thing still happens to a degree, but it's probably the people around the club who are driving that. And that atmosphere. And like you said, if you're playing a club down the road and you're my mate from down the road and we always catch up when we play each other and stand and watch the game together, that around the ground I think still happens to a large degree. But, certainly the on-field piece of it is different because, it is players and the salary cap. And, it's unfortunate. So
where I was introduced to it, I mean, when you kind of get, as you say, when you get lumped, you get appointed to the CEO. It's a great position of a local footy league. It's a wonderful position, and you get the insight to every single club, and every single person shares their knowledge with you because they trust you not to talk about it outwardly, which is a key part of the role. And I had a number in my early days. I had a number of presidents come to me and say, "Hey, we've had our juniors. We send our seniors down to juniors, and we had junior players coming through the under 16s, ready to go into the under 18s. And these at the junior level, at the under 18 level, they're coming to us and saying, Club Y down the road has just offered me $100 to go and play under 18s with them, and that." Then I realised and saw that was actually happening on quite a significant magnitude. That's not what the player payments was meant to do, in my humble opinion. But that's what it was doing. It was creating a level of expectation in the juniors coming through that particularly the good ones, could command money from somewhere. So we're commanding it from their club.
Yeah, and I'm sure they still exist. I didn't see a huge amount of it in under sort of 17, 18 age group, but I mean, we had even younger. I mean, we had a number of issues in our junior interleague program, like your rep footy program, where you'd have appoint coaches and things, and you get clubs calling you saying, "Well, what on now that other clubs have been going watching that under 15 rep team and are poaching them and making promises and commitments." Not necessarily match payments, but like development programs and connections into TOC Cup or NAB League clubs now and that sort of thing. That you could say, "Wow, geez, this is getting really competitive for talent from a 14 to 15-year-old." And as part of that, trying to draw them out of what is probably been their local community club where they started, and getting them across, hoping that will lead them to, go on and play senior footy at that particular club. So it's a challenge. I think it's always been there. But I mean, I could go back to, if you read the research when the salary cap and the player points were brought in, and I think at that point, all the, which was again out of AFL, AFL Vic, and I think all the leagues and pretty much all the clubs were supporting it because it was escalating at a rate that was just frightening, I think, at one point. And so, I think it's interesting to me that whilst there was pushback from last year on your specific question going from 220 to 200, it was pretty much universal that everybody thought that the introduction of the salary cap was a good thing. And it took some of the inflation out of where player payments were going. I'd had the same conversation with club presidents and club treasurers. I said, listen, if you've got players and trying to negotiate money, use us as a bad guy. Say, listen, Steve, I'd love to pay you X. I think you're worth so many $100 a player. I really think you're great, but those, excuse my French, but those bastards at the EDFL have put this salary cap, and I can't afford to pay you that much. So, and actually use us as the scapegoat, knowing well that guy didn't want to pay what the player thought they were, and so all of those things. And I've had precedents absolutely play that back to me. That's what they've done, and so there's no doubt that I think the introduction of them at a macro level has been good to take money and inflation out of the competitions that was, like I said, escalating a rate that was just going to end in your kind of boom or bust analogy. It was going to be a bust. So that part of it's been good. I mean, the other part we haven't really touched on, Steve, and I'm sure you want to go is I have concern about the flow on impact with volunteers because for a number of reasons. I said 220,000. You work it out. You play an 18-game season. That's over $12,000 a week. A club's got to find to pay their players, right? So you kind of think about it as just a community footy club, how you're generating $12,000 every week for 18 weeks. And so your point about a sponsorship coordinator is under a lot of pressure to, bring in sponsors and money. Everybody who's got any way connection to revenue is under pressure, whether that's kids' membership fees, chasing them up, whatever it may well be. So I think that, and we consistently hear that the turnover of club volunteers is a major issue. Their lifespan of volunteering in the club is becoming shorter in time frame. And I think pressure to try and keep the club financially viable is a part of that. And in the case of salary cap, for example, there's so much administration that goes around it. It's every player's contract's got to be written a certain time in certain ways and dated, and the right people sign it and lodged. And then each week you've got to be working out that 22 guys who run out, how much are they getting paid? And you've got to track, you've got to provide a budget before the year. You've got to track it internally to make sure you don't go over the cap. And there's a personal person's doing that, and even if you're a qualified person doing it, it's not simple. And by hell, if you end up even with an administrative error going over the salary cap, we were doing 5 or 6 clubs a year we were auditing. So for Club X, and we go, well, here's our audit report. The Club X have gone over. Then it goes to a whole range of process to work out what the penalties are, and that's part of the process. But behind that process, there's volunteers who are sweating at night, worrying that they are actually going to put their club in the position of losing premiership points, copping a fine, coaches stood down, players stood down, whatever it may well be, the penalties that come for a breach of a salary cap. And so, I saw a lot of duress. I had people calling saying, for all the right reasons, saying, can you help me out with this because I'm nervous I'm not doing it right. Can you check it for me, whatever? Because the last thing they want to do is put their club at risk. And these are unpaid volunteers who are spending lots and lots of hours. So I just think the whole player payment, whether it's generating revenue, trying to administer the salary cap and the player points with it, and all the things that are going around that is creating a lot of work and a lot of pressure on volunteers who already got, they've got governance things of OH&S, as well as the normal things of trying to get jumpers and shorts and socks and player registration, running a canteen and getting players out in the ground and who's running the scoreboard and all the normal things that go on. I just think that the player payment piece has added another layer of pressure and complexity to the volunteer base and within, and I sit there and go, well, hold on, if I'm a volunteer and I'm spending all these hours as a sponsorship coordinator and and I know how much money that's going to the centre half forward out there, and I kind of look at him and think, shit, why am I putting 20 hours a week volunteering? And, in a relative sense, is that ethically and morally right for that relativity? I mean, you're doing a workplace, you're in a commercial business, you look at all your staff and say, okay, she's getting paid this, he's getting paid that, what jobs they're doing, what responsibilities. It's the whole formal process to work out what you think is fair remuneration on a position description, a whole range of things. And I just compare that to what goes on in a football club. I know it's community, I know it's volunteer-based and all the rest of it, but now you've got a serious number of people actually getting remuneration out of it. And if I'm running that organisation, I'm trying to work out, is that kind of all fair and reasonable given the different responsibilities and tasks? And, listen, playing footy's got its own challenges and physical and all that sort of stuff. So I'm kind of going on about it, but I think there's a volunteer piece in this to me that I think is not insignificant. So.
That's where I started. But before, I've got a couple more points before we finish, because I'm conscious that we've managed to just fly through 24 minutes. But Deb, normal, you've checked in and tagged people. So thank you very much to you. Frankie, thanks very much for the commentary. And Jake Meyer 20, one of our first people from the Twitch platform coming in and commenting. Hey, mate, you don't need to donate to us to listen to us. You just tune in at 11 a.m. every day Melbourne time. And we will talk all things community sport, coming at it from a different angle. Today's angle that we're coming at it from is we're starting to really explore, peel back the layers of this player payments topic, and why do we have them, and should we have them moving forward? Craig, I'll take you back to your comment. I'll take you back to your comment where you said that the clubs said that if our 2019 team paid our 2014 team, they would get flogged because they don't have the money anymore. And I'm not entirely sure that's even relevant to the discussion, because you've got a promotion relegation, well, the EDFL is promotion relegation league. So I'll take you back to my time. We don't. The MPNFL had 3 leagues. One was a Premier League, 2 district leagues, or 2 Premier Leagues and a district league. And we were looking to move one club, Hastings, who had historically been in that Premier top division for 100+ years, but for a range of reasons, they just had to move into the smaller one. Huge community pushback. Huge. Long story short, they then went down, and then maybe 7 or 8, 9 years later, they won the premiership in that second division, or that lower division, or perceived lower division. And I watched the crowd that day, and they did not celebrate any differently than if they won the AFL Grand Final. Like, the level that they play at and the quality of football that they were playing compared to the history was irrelevant to them at that point in time. And I take the point, but is the goal Mike, come back to that point about we need more money to create the best league. It's not necessarily the job of community football to create the best league possible. It's the job of community football to create community football opportunities for the community, and the elite competitions will create the best football leagues possible, is my thinking on that topic.
Yeah, listen, and that's correct. But I think there will always be people in football clubs who are competitively driven, who want to succeed. And, and I think the other piece in it is, if you look at what clubs are spending, often there's a number of clubs who don't spend anywhere near the salary cap because they literally just can't afford to, and we'd encourage them not to. So what you can actually get is nearly like a problem with equalisation, that the club, clubs who get relegated and go down and come up, but it seems to be the same group of clubs who are bouncing between those 2 levels, and the top half of our Premier Division is the same club. So when this club, your example, they win, so they go back up, but they're evidence shows that it's very unlikely that they'll actually make finals appearance there. So they try and survive for a few years, tends to be negative impact on the club, slowly deteriorates, their on-field deteriorates, they fall back down, and then it gives them an opportunity to kind of rebuild and they go up. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I said, I think, you're right. Any club wins any premiership in senior footy I've seen, that they, it's the greatest day of the players' lives, or one of their great days, no matter what league and what division you're in. I've played in myself, and you still remember the guys you played with, and all those memories irrelevant on that day. But, I think there is a question that says, but, has our top 5 in the Premier, is that standard decline because we aren't, as a league, attracting as many marquee players as we were previously? But, it's an interesting question.
It's the question is the point, and it is just a position. It's not right or wrong, but my position is the quality is not necessarily relevant. And if it is relevant, well, let's make the quality improve through the coaching, the recruiting, but the coaching and the player development, the athlete development. And that's one of the things that player point system did do, because the locals were 1 point players as opposed to AFL players or 7 point players, was it meant that the better you developed your locals, the stronger your teams were. And Jackie, I'll just pick up your point. Thank you for joining the conversation. Netball Premier League clubs in South Australia pay their players, and some clubs, whilst not paying under 17s, they certainly don't make them pay registration fees and provide them with free uniforms, etc. This is now becoming harder and harder for some clubs to compete against and still keep their position in Premier League and keep their developing pathways. And that's exactly what we saw in the Mornington Peninsula football leagues, if you like. One league had netball, two didn't. We introduced netball, and then the first couple of years into the other two competitions, and the first couple of years there was no player payments in netball, and now we're seeing very large salary caps coming in. Oh, sorry, player payments coming in, and it goes to your point, Craig, and same in women's football, where these netball clubs and women's football teams that are associated or a part of traditional men's football clubs are looking at the investment of the club and going, well, it's not equitable. It's not fair. Why would we pay the men and the boys and not the women and the girls for that sport or that sport? There's no equity. There's no justice in that. And so they're demanding their share of the pie.
And if you've got a club who's got a set of values that says you value inclusion, diversity, then you can't ignore that. And so, yeah, I think that's going to, and that's why I think this question of it is focused on men's football, but the implications of that I think are broadening. And some point raised, I think this thing about not paying memberships is, I said to you before, I'm not sure about $100 payment to an under-18 player, but certainly we saw cases of that clubs were offering, come across to us, you don't pay membership, we'll give you your jumper and all your uniform and, a bag and all that sort of thing as incentive. In female footy and in male football, that is increasing. So I think female football is not far off. In EDFL last year, over 22% of the players were female, and so it's growing. And so teams want to get up, they want to get going, they want to get competitive, they want to win. And so it's, and their mindset, the culture has always been, okay, I've got to build from my own, but I need to top it up and bring other players in. And so we're already seeing that start to happen. See, again, you look at the clearances and transfers in senior women's footy, it's happening. It's not, it's there. It's no different. The ratios are no different to men's footy. So interesting.
Craig, you've been very, very generous with your time, and those people that have hung with us for the length of this conversation have been incredibly generous with their time. Jackie, and as always, Deb, Frankie, welcome to you, and Jake from Twitch, welcome to you, mate. It's great we're streaming into about 4 different platforms, and I think you're one of the first from Twitch to join the conversation. So welcome to you. You can tell that this is a complex discussion, and it's not one that either of us are wanting to trivialize and just say, rightio, blanket zero, those sort of things, because it has far layers and layers like an onion, and we'll continue to explore those layers. So we'll bring clubs on that still want access to as large a salary cap as we can. But then on the other side, one of the largest sporting competitions in Australia is the Victorian Amateur Football Association. So the amateurs, so we'll bring them on and get their perspective on the world as well. So Craig, you've lived and breathed it, but more importantly, I think you've gone through that consultation with the clubs, and you've really been able to listen to both those sides. And I really thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thanks, Steve. If I could close on one point, it would be that, I think it's good timing to be having discussion, because with the shutdown of most leagues and the corona, and one thing it is if we want to make a step change, now is the time to actually do it. And so and I saw reported in one of the local papers yesterday that there's talk that AFL Vic are going to come out and put $100,000 salary cap maximum across all the leagues for next year. It is clearly an opportunity to reset. And so, I think the salary cap and the points have been in 3-4 years, whatever it is, so in metropolitan footy in Melbourne. So I think given the environment that clubs are in, the leagues are in, the fact that it's an opportunity to step back and really review what's happened with those things since they've been introduced, where we're at now and what is the right systems and processes and numbers moving forward. And that's why I congratulate you on kind of raising the topics. I think it's really timely to have those discussions and think about if there's a reset. I would think 2020 is a good time to work through that.
I agree 100% because the Essendon District Football League and its sister leagues have gone to zero. So it is the perfect time to have that discussion, and we want to create that discussion, but we want it to be an informed discussion and get some perspectives, and then we'll put out a position paper. But listening to you today and just kind of formulating our position, I'm potentially thinking it's less about the salary cap, or it is about the salary cap, but the number of players that we pay within the salary cap. If there was a percentage of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 per, or whatever that number is, let's just say it's 5 just as a number, then that means that the way to develop the quality of the football then pushes back the investment into coaching and developing your local players, getting them to fall in love with the jumper and taking them on that lifelong journey. And I think that's in the spirit of football. So that's in the spirit of community sports. So we'll keep exploring it. We'll keep coming up with options, and then we'll keep putting it out to very informed people like your good self to contribute to the discussion, Craig. So thank you for your time today.
I really enjoyed it.
It's a great topic. All right, everybody, we will look forward to tomorrow. What day are we up to? Wednesday. So tomorrow, hopefully, we will start our discussion on complaints and member protection. So a bit of a different spin. And then, of course, on Friday, as normal, we have eSport Friday. So until tomorrow, I'm Steve Pallas. Thank you for being part of our sports community.
Thanks, Steve.